Hi everyone, thank you so much for joining in on this session. I'm Elisabeth Bowling and I'm Assistant Principal at Heatherset Academy, a wonderful school here in Norwich. Before this I taught in London where I did my Masters at the Institute of Education and I focused in on literacy across the curriculum. And I, like so many of us, recognise that effective communication in writing and speaking alongside reading are all absolutely vital for the students that we teach. So this session is going to go through the very complex but very important processes of writing. Now we know that writing is absolutely key to academic success and life success in general. And Jennifer Webb puts it really brilliantly at the start of her new book. She says, people who can successfully communicate have the capacity to change things, to campaign and to show their worth. But those who don't have that ability are effectively disenfranchised. And we know that low literacy disproportionately affects the disadvantaged. Those born into lower socioeconomic houses are less likely to reach proficiency in their written expression. And the National Literacy Trust has done some research in this area and they found that as many as 1 in 6 adults have very poor literacy, such that it presents them with a barrier in their day-to-day life. And this just isn't good enough. Jeff Hurst puts at the start of his book, Don't Call It Literacy, he says we should be angry about this, and I think he's absolutely right, that so many people have all those years of compulsory education and yet don't leave with the confidence that they need and deserve to express themselves through written communication. It's just not good enough. So we know that effective writing is an absolute reflection and a tool of social justice. But it's also a very important learning process in itself. Writing both displays knowledge and it generates it. So I think we often think that writing is something that we do at the end of a lesson or at the end of a sequence of lessons in order to show off, this is what I know now. And yes, it can be a product of learning, but it's also a process of it. Through writing, we push our thinking, we process, we synthesize, we draw together information, and we reach higher levels of complexity. And I think this actually has a lot to do with the physical process of writing. When we write, we need to slow down. Whether we handwrite or type, we're slowing down our thought processes. And in doing so, we have time to think and push and stretch and reach higher levels of nuance and complexity. And this is reinforced by the research. The authors of Make It Stick reviewed studies and found that students in classrooms which embedded regular extended writing into their lessons performed significantly higher than those that merely copied short bits of text of information from the board. And because writing involves retrieval, elaboration and generation, it therefore leads to stronger learning. And I think we all recognise that lots of students find writing really, really difficult. Steven Pinker quotes Darwin, who says that it's an unnatural act. Unlike speaking, we don't just learn it naturally, we won't just absorb it through osmosis. It needs to be explicitly taught and deliberately practised. And the National Literacy Trust again found out that loads of students just don't enjoy it, and the percentages of children who enjoy it go down as they get older. Now, I think this is massively to do with the fact that students find it hard, or this belief that it's difficult. And, it is such a complex task that if we teach it all at once, and if we expect everything at once in an extended piece of writing, it will really quickly lead to cognitive overload. Daisy Christodoulou says that we need to break down the complex process of writing into discrete individual units and practice them independently. And she likens extended writing to playing a game of football. You don't necessarily get better at playing football just by playing endless 90-minute games after 90-minute games. Instead, you get better at football when a coach breaks the game down to its component parts, things like passing, dribbling, tackling, throwing on. Please don't ask me to list any more football processes, please. But you practice those sections separately, and then you build them together into the whole game. And for Christadoulou, writing is exactly the same. We don't just get better at writing by writing endless extended pieces. We need to break down that process into its smaller component parts, master them independently, teach them explicitly, and then put them together. And I think this is really important in banishing that myth that some children are just inherently better at writing than others, and there's nothing that we can do about that. I mean, of course, it's clear that some children do reach fluency in their writing seemingly more effortlessly than others, but that doesn't mean to say that others won't learn it. It just means we need to break it down and teach it more explicitly. And it's totally understandable that lots of teachers lack confidence in this area. We probably don't really remember when we were taught to write, and it's just something that we can do, and we might not even feel particularly confident that we can do it well. And this can be a big barrier for our teaching. But let's be honest, teachers are the best communicators in existence. So this session goes through the ways that we can break down that process so that we can feel more confident and we can help our students be more confident in their written expression. Because we are all responsible for teaching writing. Because language is the means by which we all teach and learn, we are all teachers of language. And writing requires a really good knowledge of what to write alongside a really good knowledge of how to write. And because of this, it's best taught in subjects with clearly defined content. As we teach our disciplinary content, we need to be teaching how to communicate that content explicitly as well. So I worry that I've been a little bit negative so far about the importance of writing, but also the challenges that we face when teaching it. And I really don't mean to be, because expert writing absolutely can be taught, and it is transformative. We need to be deciding in advance what we want students to write and how we want them to write it. When we've decided that, we need to slow right down, model this to students, explicitly teach the broken down processes of writing. And we need to consider what beautiful writing looks like at word level, sentence level, and extended text level. And finally, I'm going to be following Christine Counsell in advocating a subject-specific approach. We need to be scrutinising what expert writing looks like in our subjects, breaking this down and teaching it clearly to children. So let's start with word level. You're absolutely going to want to decide the high leverage individual words that illuminate writing in your areas. So work together with other subject specialists and decide your wonderful gems of words that you love to see in pieces of writing. These words are going to definitely be tier 3 words. Tier 3 words are those subject-specific specialist vocabulary that's needed in each subject area. Words like photosynthesis, allegro, nucleus, to use some of the examples that Alex Quigley outlines in his brilliant book, Closing the Vocabulary Gap. But it's tier 2 words that can be actually really powerful when creating fluency in writing. Tier 2 words are those really valuable words that appear across the curriculum, but you don't necessarily always hear in verbal communication. Words like abolished, irrevocably, authority, fundamental, paradigm. And as Quigley says, it's this tier 2 vocabulary that is essential in cracking the academic code. Now, any word list is going to be gloriously subjective, and here is my gloriously subjective random favourite words at the moment. Now, this is always in flux, but right now these are the words that I absolutely love teaching, and I love it when my students use, and my students know that I love these, and so they use them more, I think, because I've shared my love for them so much with the groups. Now, it's interesting that some of these words are both sort of tier 3 words, like catalyst, for example, is a definite subject-specific scientific tier 3 word, but throw it in an English essay and it becomes a kind of tier 2 word that is a really advanced, excellent interpretation of, say, for example, I don't know, Lady Macbeth and her impact on Macbeth's downfall. Now, if you want to upgrade the formality of written expression, you might like to consider nouns or concepts in writing. This is from David Didell's The Secret of Literacy, and you can see on the left the expression there is quite informal, it sounds quite verbal, but then when you replace those words with nouns or concepts like reaction, redness, irritation, itchiness, suddenly that discourse sounds a lot more academic. And you can see the same thing here in a literature essay. We've got the adjectives and the verbs on the left, replace them with those nouns, concepts on the right, and you sound a lot more assured and confident. And a really nice activity is actually to list your concept nouns on the board with a topic, and you get students to verbalise, to talk through that topic using those nouns, and then building that into a short piece of writing. It's a really effective way of making their writing sound more academic and more confident. So after word level, we're going to be wanting to build two beautiful sentences, and this is where we absolutely need to slow right down. We need to model how to write accurate sentences. We need to show children how to do it and verbalise our thinking as we do so. Chris Curtis is an amazing English teacher, and he wrote How to Teach English, and he is always verbalising and modelling the process of writing in front of his class. So we'll get to the front and he'll write and he'll say, I'm starting with a capital letter and I'm choosing this word here and I'm punctuating like this and I'm going to finish that sentence there. And then he looks back and says, right, I don't like that one, I'm going to change that, I'm going to move that there. And I really love this approach because it really shows students that writing takes really careful thought. So I'm going to model a basic sentence, and I'm going to take the approach of Thomas Fisher, who is an absolute literacy guru, and he uses the direct instruction approach of expressive writing. First you name, and then you tell more. For example, in music, first you name crotchets. I've got my capital letter there because it starts a sentence. Then you tell more are worth one beat, full stop. I've named, I've told more, I've got my full stop. I have a precise and confident sentence. And then I'll continue. First you name an isosceles triangle. Again, I've got my capital letter because it's the start of the sentence. And here I've got a really tricky spelling, isosceles. So we're going to stop. We're going to talk about that spelling. We're going to pick out the rules that we need to remember. We're going to cover it, we're going to write it, we're going to turn to our partner and tell them what we need to remember about the spelling of isosceles. And then we tell more has at least two equal sides, full stop. Again, Newton's first law. We've got a capital letter here, but now for two reasons we're going to want to stop and talk about that. It's the start of a sentence and it's a name, it's a proper noun. We need that capital letter. And then we have that apostrophe. Now, we love an apostrophe, but we know that students love to forget to use their apostrophe. So we need to stop here and we need to talk about that apostrophe. Why is it there? It's because the law is the possession of Newton. It's a possessive apostrophe. And then we tell more, states that stationary objects will stay stationary unless a resultant force acts upon them, full stop. I'll let the science experts explain the content there. But by modelling that sentence, we've got a beautifully constructed, precise sentence. Again, Neville Chamberlain was Prime Minister of the UK when World War II broke out. We name and then we tell more. We've got a lot of tricky capital letters there that lots of students will forget. We're going to want to talk about them. And finally, it says Galileo. Sorry, my face is obscuring it. Galileo is known as the father of modern science. So we've got lovely, accurate, precise sentences. Now, when we're happy that we're really secure in those basic sentences and they're accurately punctuated, we might want to start modelling some variations, some upgrades, and again, this needs to be done slowly, modelled carefully on the board and talked through clearly. So we might want to add an adverb at the start. Interestingly, surprisingly, firstly, suddenly. We'll draw attention to that comma and we'll talk about how the adverb both adds fluency and adds a little touch of opinion or meaning to the fact that Galileo is known as the father of modern science. We've got that lovely adverb start. We might then want to add extra information using because, but, or so. This is an approach advocated by the Writing Revolution, and I know that loads of departments across the country are doing brilliant work with because, but, so and Writing Revolution approaches. For example, Pritesh Raitura's blog outlines loads of ways the Writing Revolution can be used in scientific writing, and I'd really recommend that you have a little look at that. Because, but, so is really nice because not only does it expand sentences, but it also asks students to sort through their knowledge to select the appropriate information to continue from the because, the but, and the so. Also from the Writing Revolution is the use of appositives. Now, appositive is just a fancy word really for when you add extra information inside a sentence. So we've added here a Renaissance physicist surrounded by those commas. And not only does it sound confident and assured, it also gives students the opportunity to add their extra background knowledge. Next, you might want to consider subordinate clauses. Again, it's a scary word for a relatively simple concept. You simply add extra information in front of your basic sentence and follow it up with a comma. The subordinate clause might start with if, when, after, although, as soon as, before, and I love it when students use although because it shows that they can understand two opposing ideas inside the same sentence. As here, although he was criticised in his time, Galileo is known as the father of modern science. Finally, a variation of the subordinate clause would be to start one with an ing verb, and these are gorgeous. Proving the Copernican theory that planets revolve around the sun, Galileo is known as the father of modern science. Again, we need to point out that comma. And all of these can be modelled on the board, talked through, practiced in isolation. You're going to want to pick the ones that work best for your class and also for what they're writing about. And you might want to use the modelling approach of I do, we do, you do, so that you can approach mastery of each sentence type. Okay, now we all know how much I love an although sentence, and trust me, my pupils know it as well. So it's worth you collecting your own kind of super sentence structures and sharing them with groups. You know, those sentences that really make you smile. Here's a few I've collected from colleagues that they particularly love, and it's worth you collecting some and looking at, always being on the lookout for more, really. Okay, so we've looked at word level and sentence level modelling. We now want to delve into more extended level writing, and I think I've shown how important oracy can be in this. The more students talk through their ideas, the more confident and secure they are in their knowledge, the more it provides a bridge to effective written communication. So, you know, get them talking as much as possible, put them in pairs, give them 30 seconds, give them some vocabulary, get them verbalising as much as possible. And then connectives, such as these, can be really useful because they help link ideas and they ask pupils to consider causation or comparison. And Rosalind Walker has a great blog that you should definitely look at, especially if you're a science teacher, and she goes through how these connectives can be used brilliantly in science. Now, when we're wanting students to write more extended pieces, and by extended I don't mean necessarily pages and pages, we might just mean, you know, a few paragraphs, we do need to make sure we're showing them how to plan. Now, there's nothing worse, is there, than reading a class set of books and finding that the writing is disorganised and rushed and unstructured, but the reality is that planning cohesive pieces of writing is a very, very, very advanced skill. And we need to be scaffolding students and showing them how to do that a lot before they're able to do it independently. So my preferred method would look a little bit like this. I'd get all their ideas up on the board, I'd elicit all their different ideas, and it would look a little bit messy, and then we would start thinking about the order. We'd put numbers on it. Now those numbers would probably link to the paragraph numbers, and then from there we would write together our topic sentences. Topic sentences are the first sentence of each paragraph, paragraph that outlines what that whole paragraph will be about. And I would plan with a class, we would write the topic sentences together, and then I would let them go and complete the rest more independently. So I think the most important thing really to take away from this is the importance of subject specialists to consider carefully what gorgeous writing looks like in their subject areas. So on the whole, we know that generic approaches to whole school literacy, they just don't really work. They don't have the impact that we want them to have. They're too vague. And the EEF recognises this in their recommendations from last year. They recognise that each subject has its own unique way of communicating, and it's up to us to notice this and to teach it clearly. So we're empowering all students to write like a geographer or a scientist or a mathematician. Now, I mentioned earlier that I share Christine Counsell's wariness of the generic, and in this blog she outlines a really great approach a teacher might take to scrutinising subject writing. She imagines a head of history reading a class set of essays and asking herself a series of questions about the writing. What is a strong argument here? What does a strong argument look like? In what different ways have these essays been structured and organised? Which ways work most successfully? Which ways do I want to show and share with future classes? And what is giving these students power as they survey and wonder, judge and reckon? Now, these series of questions are, for me, just absolutely brilliant. They embrace the power of our teaching to open doors for students, to allow them to survey and wonder, judge and reckon. They see the process of knowledge and the process of writing as overlapping, and this close and enthusiastic scrutiny of pupil work will no doubt make us better, more responsive teachers. And we can do the same with exemplar work, and this is taken from AQA's geography specimen material, and it's interesting to see how it's been written. We start with a simple confident sentence which first names and then tells more, full stop. We've got a positive sentence here, which despite lacking a capital for Dutch, it does work well in showcasing the student's background information, background knowledge. And we've got a lovely connective of causation here as a result, which serves to link their ideas chronologically. And I'd want to share this scrutiny of both the content of this answer and the knowledge of how it's written with departments and students. Here we've got a gorgeously written computing response, which involves the very complex skill actually of comparing. And we can see just how many connectives of comparison have been used. We've got whereas, despite, however, furthermore, all beautifully partnered by that comma. We've got tier 2 vocabulary, simultaneously, advantage, enables. And right at the bottom, look, we've got glorious semicolon. And all of these things work together to reflect this student's confidence in what they're writing and in their written expression as well. And we could be even more aspirational and look at this news story from the BBC website in a PE lesson, for example. We've got brilliant vocabulary in anthem, discrimination, brutality. In the middle, we've got that connective meanwhile, which serves to widen the picture painted by the reporter. And we've got that powerful positive in that last paragraph, the first sentence, which gives that extra information. And I'm sure that you'll agree that writing like this is really important to look at, both in its content and in its clear expression. Now, after students have written, we're again going to need them to model the process of proofreading, checking, correcting, offering rewards, for example, for those who are able to improve, say, 5 different things in their writing. Lots of us are now moving to using visualizers, and these are a fantastic tool. You can take students' writing, put it immediately under the board and look, display it on the board and look together in both how they've organised their content, but also how they've written. How they've actually expressed themselves. And when we're asking pupils to redraft written work, it's great to give them a writing focus for that. So I love it when I can see extended paragraphs have been redrafted in books, but it's not been improved for its content, it's instead been improved for its expression. So often you can see the improved fluency between the original piece of writing and the redrafted one that's been improved by connectives, topic sentences, sentence forms, appositives, adding in those adverbs to begin with. So that is it. So these are the things that I think work in improving the writing of quality across the quality of writing across the curriculum. Now, we know there's no quick fix. Ofsted recognised this in 2013 when they said that any literacy intervention needs to be sustained. But I hope you'll share my belief that it is nevertheless absolutely transformative and so important. So, give it your attention, break down and model the processes of expert writing, and share your gems with colleagues and students. Thank you so much for your time. Don't hesitate to get in contact with any questions or thoughts you might have, and I hope that was useful. Thank you.